and it's time for Lefties Losing It. So much of what is wrong in the West can be traced back to the warped thinking, the suicidally stupid self-loathing of the awfuls. That's the affluent white female leftists, the Karens who not only vote left, but they're determined to make a nuisance of themselves, pushing their twisted ideology. Even a yoga studio is not safe from the madness. Watch these mad banshees attack some poor workers at a Minneapolis yoga studio because they want these workers to issue formal statements against ICE, US Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Go. Say them out loud and for the camera for all my viewers. Let's hear it. Why are you being silent? Let's hear it, Delaney, loud and proud, baby. You want to say it? F***ing say it. Why? Okay, let's go. It's an and a well. You should have well-rehearsed corporate action and words ready to go.
Yes, the poor workers at the yoga studio must issue statements against ICE. Now let's hear from the crazy Karen who led that protest.
Because I know that the set people don't make a lot of money, and I always want to be able to support people who have to clean up. One of the people in the class said to me, you know what, we shouldn't put our weights away today. We should let corporate cleaning it up since they're here to see how everything is. And that's exactly what we did. So rather than putting all the weights back and organizing like I normally would, we just left them on the floor.
Yes, a brave and stunning stand by the yoga mums there. And instead of standing up for their workers, that studio has caved into the mob and is now putting up anti-ICE signs in its studios in Minneapolis. Absolutely pathetic. Let's check in now on an activist using the medium of dance and knitted jumpers to protest against President Trump and ICE. Wow, I can't see how President Trump can possibly recover from that. Let's hear now from Sunny Hostin, the co-host of The View, who makes some incredible claims here about the world's richest man, Elon Musk.
I think we need to call a thing when we're talking about someone like Elon Musk. He has trafficked in white supremacy on the internet, on social media, on X for quite some time. He sparked some controversy just on January 8th, calling for white solidarity and warning that white men would be slaughtered if they became a minority. He also posted in September that white people are a rapidly diminishing minority of the global population. And in December, he said that the South African government is super racist against anyone who isn't black. And he has also said that he is not African, that he is actually of British and English descent. And so we know what this is. He is a white supremacist. In my view, he is a racist.
So Elon Musk is a racist and a white supremacist for simply noting facts that Sunny does not like. I've got to say one thing to Sunny Hostin. It's not Elon Musk whose family has a history of being slave owners.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, you know, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Let's hear now from a trans activist who thinks the real victim, the first victim of a horrific mass shooting in Canada is the killer himself because the killer was trans.
The first victim of this tragedy was the shooter. And you can disagree all you want. But that person did not just decide one day that it was the day. It was the day that they could not take it any longer.
Let's bring in filmmaker and commentator Ami Horowitz. Ami, this is the latest mass shooting attributed to a trans or non-binary killer, or as the Canadian authorities call him, the gun person. God forbid they should misgender a mass killer.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then separately, do you know the gun person's relationship to...
Ami, what more do we know about this gunman, Jesse Van Rutselaar, and this horrific crime?
Yeah, you stole one of my notes. I mean, how Orwellian, gun person. That is, God, that is chilling and crazy. Yes, we know this was a trans person. First of all, look, as we now have to say, we talk about gun laws and what their effects are ultimately on shootings. Canada has one of the strictest gun laws, certainly in the world, and yet this is a mass shooting that we've had. Look, if the gunman, Rita, if the gunman wasn't a straight white male, it's the job of the authorities to hide their identity. That's the way it works, right? It's a straight white male. We'll identify him all the live long day. But if it's not, so if it's a trans person, we're gonna do whatever we can to obscure what the identity is, right? And look, I had, like I always do, I do show prep, and I did my research with AI, and we always have that fun AI stories. And I asked, well, what % of school shootings we've had in the last 5 years have been from trans people? And it refused to give me a number. It kept saying it's a very, very low number. I swear it would not. I had to list every single one of the last 5 years mass school shootings and individually go through them. And what's the answer? There's been 5 in the last 5 years, and 2 of the 5, 40%, have been people who are trans or non-binary. Yet
since we last talked about this, I went and checked that out for myself. I asked the not just ChatGPT but Grok, and asked precisely what you were talking about, to list the number of mass shootings in the recent years that have involved a trans shooter or a non-binary shooter, and it just refuses to do it. When you then give it a number of events, it will acknowledge it and repeat those to you, but it will not compile a list, which is extraordinary, because I could ask it to compile any other sort of list and it will normally do it. But there is just this determination not to acknowledge that perhaps there is a problem here. Now let's move along to the House of Representatives today, passing a massive election integrity bill, 218 to 213 votes. We've talked about this before, Army, about how popular this policy is. Around 85% of Americans back voter ID, but the Democrats continue to oppose it. They voted against the Save America Act, Army.
Yeah, and this happens over and over and over again. All the Democrats voted against it in the House, save one. Look, there's a reason why they continue to push universal mail-in balloting and ballot harvesting and voting all year long and against voter ID. And by the way, also voting for non-citizens to vote. I know. They all say that's not true. That's a scurrilous lie. It absolutely 100% is true. In New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, in DC, and other cities, they have voted to have non-citizens vote, okay? I'm sorry, that's the reality. They want to try to get away from that all they want, but it's just not possible. Look, Rita, last week we talked about the reason why I made that voter ID video, because somebody voted for my dad. What I didn't tell you, the second part of that story, which ties into this, is that I took a photo of that and I sent that to the California Board of Elections. I go, look, you claim there's no voter fraud. Here is an absolute clear indication of voter fraud. You know how quickly they got back to me? They never got back to me. They don't care. They don't want to know. That's the reality. Look, Rita, in virtually every Western European country, you have to show ID to vote. That's just part of what it is. They don't want to safeguard elections because they call safeguarding elections voter suppression. That's the Democratic Party. Okay, the reality is they want this problematic issue to be in our voting because they feel whatever. We can go into, that's a whole different discussion on why they don't want voter integrity. I think they think it's going to help elect Democrats, okay? And this, Rita, is the party of democracy.
It's the only answer, Army. That's the only answer. Why else would you campaign against, vote against a policy that poll after poll shows around 85% of Americans back? And we brought you the CNN coverage of that issue last week. The polling on this is clear. This is almost it's not even an 80-20 issue. It's close to a 90-10 issue. And yet the Democrats are staunchly against voter ID. Now, Talking about Democrats, Democrat heartland of California has lost another billionaire. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is fleeing Gavin Newsom's California and heading to Florida. Army. He has purchased a massive waterfront mansion in Miami and he is expected to live in it. It's not supposed to be a holiday home. They're expecting him to move to the red state in April. Why are so many people leaving California for places like Florida and Texas and Tennessee? It's a bit of a theme there.
Yeah, I can't tell if that was a rhetorical question or a real question, Rita. Well, I mean, California is it's unbelievable. Here's the data. Okay, in the last 10 years, 10 million people have left California, including dozens of billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg, taking with them all their job creation, all their innovation. It's all going out the door to the states who are welcoming people who want to create wealth, okay? Not California. You know, the greatest stat of all is that if you want to rent a U-Haul one way from California to Texas, it is 4 times more expensive in that direction than Texas coming back to, because no one is doing that. Look, this hurts my heart. It does. As you know, I am a long time, I live in New York, but I am a LA boy. I am a California boy at heart, okay? And it pains me to no end to see the destruction of my state. And one of the main drivers of the ultra wealthy leaving is because they've been pushing, and now they're about to possibly pass, a 5% wealth tax on the ultra rich. Now, to be clear what that is, you're talking about real estate holdings for businesses, you're talking about ownership of businesses, and you're talking about stock portfolios. And for those who don't understand what that means, that's not an extra 5% tax on your earnings. What that means is if you own a business that you haven't realized its gains because you're pouring all the money back into the business, if the business is valued at $1 billion, right? And I was told there wasn't going to be any math on this interview, but I guess there's going to be. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars that you have to pay because you have a business, or if you have stockholders, if you haven't realized the gains in your stock. It doesn't matter if you don't have that money. You have to pay that in taxes. No one can do that. Okay, that is a horrific albatross to have on you. And what that has done is driven people away. Now they've tried wealth taxes all over the world, and they have all failed spectacularly. Okay. And to be clear again, the rich don't pay their fair share, right? How often do you hear that? Okay, a couple of statistics, which I think is really, really helpful here, is that the top 1%, I'm going to read the notes because these numbers are important. The top 1% of earners, right, they pay 40% of all taxes. They earn 20% of all earnings, yet pay 40%. The bottom 50% pay 3% of all taxes, but earn 13%, okay? The bottom, I'm sorry these stats, but they're important. The bottom 50% pay 4% of their income in taxes, okay? And the top 1%, they pay 27% of their income that they get in taxes. So you tell me, the rich don't pay their fair share? The rich are carrying this country, okay? And what you're doing is you're trying to make them flee and leave. And by the way, if you do this writ large across the country, they're going to leave the country also because they just simply can't afford to do it.
As long as when they move to those red states, and we're seeing that's a similar trend from New York as well to places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, just don't keep voting the same way that you have, because a lot of these people fleeing California keep voting Democrat in their new home state. Army Horowitz, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Always a pleasure.